welcome to this week's episode of Menu Combat. I'm back. Sorry that I could not be here last week, but this week we got something really exciting, and that is my first 2 hours and 10 minutes of Persona 4. And I gotta say, I don't know how I feel. Look, so I'm coming from Persona 5, and I like playing old games, right? Like I played Final Fantasy 7, I played Dragon Quest 1. Old games don't bother me. I think the thing that shocks me is that Five's opening was really specific about thrusting you into the experience of action, and Four is not. I wish I counted exactly how long it takes, but I'm like, you have one mini gameplay experience at the beginning where you face a shadow, not even a shadow, right? Like shadows are actual enemies, a ghostly figure. And what are you doing for the next hour? Look, I get it. Persona, in its heart of hearts, and I think really driving home in 4, is a visual novel at heart. And I don't even think that's bad. That's just what it is. In fact, let me just lead into that. Persona 4 being a visual novel is so interesting in its DNA, and I don't know if it's just the Golden compared to original Persona 4, right? So I'm playing Golden, the remaster that came out on Switch, and I can't tell what I think about the omniscient narrator that's happening. I'm used to, obviously, our boy in the Velvet Room talking and giving all of that, but I'm not used to the small sound effects. Like, take for example, when the detective leaves, you hear the car go, they try to make sure they have text to show you that the car is leaving. Or when Yosuke bumps into the trash can the first time and it's like, you leave him be. Like, they are making the decision for you, and that's not wrong, right? Like, in these games, they're not, you have choices, but it isn't like that. I just find it interesting that the game is trying to tell you about the choice in a retroactive way, where I'm assuming that is the more visual novel element, trying to find ways to convey the emotions or things that obviously what is a little bit more static in terms of game design is. But I just can't. I had a little bit of experience of Persona 3 Fez, and I'm like, I don't know if I remember Fez being like that. I would have to really go back into my memory. But that visual novel element of trying to build this thing up beyond just Igor in the Velvet Room is so interesting, right? He does obviously the tarot card opening, trying to predict the future. And oh man, I have a whole side note about that. But I find the tarot card beginning opening and trying to tell you what's to come, the inciting incident. They're trying to make this obviously a compelling hook. But then they keep saying, I wonder what school life awaits separate from Igor, just as a text blurb. These are such interesting decisions to try to build the idea of what is being happening. And I guess the question goes back to a question I've always asked, which is, what does it take for you to feel the emotions of the player? What does it take for you to read the experiences? I think about, like, there's a moment where Nanako is watching a quiz on TV and it's like, you shouldn't bother her. Like, it is those moments where I'm like, what is this? What is the in-game narrator designed to do? And is that more effective or ineffective? And I don't know. It's just peculiar. It's very unusual of a design choice, but I'm not saying it's bad. It's just coming off a 5, it's odd. And I think about other games at the time where they wouldn't have done that. And so I'm excited to hear folks tell me whether or not, let me know, is this just the Golden version, right? Because I know that obviously being a Vita port, is this just the nature of going to a handheld platform and their desire to like really fill you in ways that they assume that you can't feel? Because I guess that's where my head is at. It's like, do they just expect you not to feel the emotions of these characters? And yeah, how does that come into play? I think the interesting thing is the way that they build Junez, right? And obviously this means that Junez is going to be so at the crux of this story. And I can't decide what I think, right? They're giving you the whole jingle of Junez. Uh, oh man, what does Nanako say? And then you have the option to sing it back. They're doing a good job to make you not trust Junez, right? I think the only thing that makes you trust Junez is Yosuke, right? Because I think it's just his family that moved into town, and obviously everybody has a good time at Junez or something like that. It is designed to be such a hooky thing, but it obviously does not build up for you to believe that they have anything meaningful going on. And that leads to my second piece about like how is Persona 4 designed to hook the player? Because they remove so much options from the player at the beginning that it's very difficult. And maybe I'm not remembering 5 well, but that opening to 5 just feels so strong. And I guess the narrative hook of you being in jail is such a better one. This is trying to do two things, right? Which is build up the mystery, which is nicely done, right? You have the TV telling you what's going on. You have different programs describing what's going on. I mean, you meet the people and things happen. I mean, shout out to the death of Nashiko so quickly. Like they're building that sense of, hey, what's going on? What's the mystery? I think what's most fascinating is that they're really trying to not just build the mystery of who's king, but try to build the mystery of like, what is this universe you're going into in the TV, right? Like we know all of this is called the Midnight Channel, but what is the mechanics of the universe, right? And I think that's the challenging question so far. As I said, only 2 hours in, I just got the persona for Chie, so not super far, just to give people context. But it makes me wonder if I'm playing this without knowing that this is a Persona game where I trust the narrative. What is my real thoughts? In fact, I look at the characters and I already have certain like anticipations, and I got spoiled at one thing, kind of, about who is the villain. I won't say anything for now, but I saw a video of it. I was like, oh, greatest Atlas villains. And they showed Metaphor Fantasia. I was like, oh yeah, they're going to do that. And I didn't realize that they would reveal the 4 villain. But I'd already had inklings because of how 5 is built up. I think, there's so many other thoughts. I go back to something that the lyrics say, which is that I wish there was some way to tell the truth bigger than us, right? And obviously I'm talking about the Golden Open, which is Shadow. And it makes me feel that the tarot cards have a nice different element going on. When I say that, is that the question is like, what can provide truth? What is truth? What is honest? And that they're driving that point home really quick with Shadow Yosuke, Shadow Chie, and what is the real accuracy. And it makes me feel like, interestingly enough, they're saying the tarot cards are keys to the truth, which is such an interesting question, right? I have different thoughts on tarot, but I want to go beyond that. It's like, I'm curious culturally what led them to that, like, that being their answer. And obviously, maybe that's even a deceitful setup. And who knows, right? Like, I'm curious what will be the reveal of that, right? Because, I mean, Persona 5 sets up something to be the villain, and there's kind of like a heel turn in going towards Royal, even towards a core ending. It makes me wonder what Golden's going to talk about with these access to like other spiritual questions, and that being access to your truth. And I think that got me meditating on the darkness of Chie and the darkness of Yosuke. What does that mean, right? Yosuke talks about hating the place that he's in and this very negative take. And what does it mean to accept those negative things, right? Is it that those negative things are true? Right? Is that the true self, right? Like, because that's the whole thing the Shadow says. Like, the Shadow is like, we are the true self. And it's like, not necessarily, right? In that disparity between who do we know them to be and who do they know deep in themselves. And I think, I'm curious to see how that continues to play out. The stuff with Chie is really challenging, right? Where Shadow Chie is dealing with trying to help save Yukiko. And Yukiko is, you hear her thoughts of, Chie gives me meaning. Chie is the only one who helps me see a vision for myself. and that she feels helpless. She feels stuck in a role as the in. She feels stuck and feels like she has no agency. And then she's jealous of Chie. And then Chie talks about how, or Shadow Chie talks about the, not control. Yeah, I mean, a little bit of control, but it's like the need for Yukiko in her life to make her feel inflated better in terms of her sense of self. And it's so interesting to see that wrestle, right? Because what is the decision that she's making versus what is the dark parts of her saying? And I think that's her accepting that is coming to terms with that that's a part of who she is. And I think this is something I think about a lot, which is like, how different are your actions from what you feel? I guess to be personal for a second, I go to therapy and we talk a lot about me and my therapist, and he's a cognitive behavior therapy, and he talks a little bit about the need to the distance between reality and feeling. And in particular, I think in a game like this where feeling is telling you one thing, but what's the reality, or what are the choices you're going to make in spite of that feeling? Because the choices hold bigger weight, because the choices show a more true feeling, right? And you can make choices that change and counter what you feel, and those are also representations of you. And it's interesting because that is already an interesting question to meditate on. And I think it's exciting to see that even 2 hours into this game, that those perspectives, those are the connections I'm drawing on, and those are thoughts. I know many folks don't align with cognitive behavior therapy, so that's not the end all be all. Please don't take this as like that's the solution. No, but I know that that's where I have been as a person, and I can easily start having that, imagine that challenge, right? Both Yosuke and Chie had with their dark selves about accepting that. And then just because you accept that doesn't mean that that's all who you are, right? That's another dialogue choice. Like, that's not all that who you are. But also is that if you accept that part of yourself, it doesn't need to be this dramatic thing, which is another part of cognitive behavior therapy that my therapist talks about, where it's like, just because this is a feeling or perspective you've had, that doesn't mean that this is all of what you're thinking or all what you're feeling. And if you lower the risk of the narrative of yourself, you're able to take that in as like, all right, that's a part of me, like many other thoughts, right? I don't only have to cling on to the good thoughts or the negative thoughts. I can accept the multiple perspectives of thoughts, which I guess basically all I'm saying is the story of the game is working well. I did not mean to go into that analysis of Persona and thinking about my personal growth. I think right now the thing that stands out as a really thing, right, going back to the tarot, is how shuffle time works. I really love it, right? Like, instead of negotiations, instead of that, it's the randomization process, and that can be annoying, but I'm seeing how that you don't only get cards of monsters, but you get cards to restore HP, cards to make enemies not see you, and I'm excited to see how that works out as a mechanic all the way throughout, because that is what I understand as more of a procedurally generated dungeon design, that being able to modify and alter on the fly what's happening and the choices that you're making, and the level of attrition, right? Thinking about how that was a key element of Persona 5, and I'm sure Persona 4 is a more classic dungeon crawler. More attrition means that they should give you tools to alter that grind, and not grind in the sense of level up, but alter the afflictions that you're going to face, minimize them, alter them. And I'm excited. Like, as you can tell, I'm already impressed by Shuffle Time as a core mechanic that literally, based on your play, you're able to increase the amount. It's really, really exciting. I honestly am glad that I'm playing this now. I think my friend of mine gave me a copy back on the PS2 back in like 2011, but I don't think I would have understood it. In particular, I don't think the game has built up the idea of switching personas in your main character that much yet. And mind you, might be really early. Maybe they've really designed it for you not needing to change. But because I carry that back from P5, I'm already switching back and forth between Pixie and your main, I think, Inigo, the Thunder guy. And that alone of seeing how they're getting new attacks, the ways in which the different stats for different enemies, and I'm already using that knowledge of like, oh, if I switch over to this persona, I'll take this block differently. I honestly think that that's a underappreciated fact of persona, right? Like I think we talk about it in the sense of I can use this to give me this advantage in battle, or I switch over for more defensive because of the actual actions they give you a Rakunda or a Dia, right? Like that kind of talking, I think we know, but I don't think we think about the actual stats inherently in of themselves and how that affects how you feel in battle. Honestly, it's a little Golden Sunny when you think about it, right? When in Golden Sun, you would do attacks and that could lower your stats, and then you have to adjust on the fly. Here you have it's almost as if you're equipping. In that case, you're disequipping Jin. Here you're obviously attaching demons and monsters to be able to alter your stats and not just alter the moves you have access to. And I think that's the differentiation I'm trying to make. It's one thing to be able to change what actions you have access to, but to change the fundamental stats, I'm excited to see how that works out. And I think that's just a level of thinking that I hadn't really been building or reflecting on, or even just subconsciously I've developed coming back from P5. I'm also not going to lie to y'all. I looked up how to get the golden root. This is some of the most confusing explanations I've seen in my lifetime. Building up on a conversation for 2 weeks ago, not 2 weeks, 2 episodes ago about what information do I need to know to enjoy this experience. Because the golden route exists and that's the story that people care most about, I looked that up. I'm not going to lie to y'all. And so, do I actually understand half the things that people are telling me? No. But I did it, right? Like, you talk about content I don't want to miss. I think this is an example that this is content I don't want to miss. And I think maybe partly, truly, because royal content was way better than I believed that it was going to be, I'm like, I gotta see what the golden content is. Like, if this is how you treat a year or so after the original release, some ways to flesh out the core meaning of the story in Royal, where to the point where I'm like, I can't imagine playing that game without Royal. I think I would think less of Persona 5. I'm like, is Golden as strong? I know that the answer has a different legacy to P3, but I don't know fully when it comes to the golden route in Persona 4 Golden if that has the same reputation as Royal. So I'm enjoying the game, right? Like I think this is a good strong start. I think the mystery is pretty compelling. I think the ways in which they affect narration is interesting. It's been neat. I'm so curious. Did we need an hour and a half to build this up, right? Because as I said, the idea is about mystery of the world, mystery of the mechanics of the world. Oh, also, very beginning, remember when you come off the gas station, they're like, hey, do you want to go on a walk? That is the most pointless walk of all time in any video game. Because you could talk to people, but there's nothing for you to gain from those interactions. You see the place that you might be frequenting, but you can't even really interact with anybody. It is by far the question of like, why even give me this as an option? Which maybe the answer is just to give you a save point. But then you go to your home where you have the calendar as a save point. I don't know. If someone has a thought about why they give you the chance to walk that street, like maybe you're making the argument that when you first go into the TV world, there's a version of that road and therefore you probably wouldn't have pieced that together if you didn't get an example. Is that what you're saying? It's an interesting design choice. And so those are my Persona Golden thoughts so far. I will definitely keep you guys updated as I continue to play. But I will say this so I don't forget it. Truth, lyrics, tarot cards, when we talk about music, we'll get there. Now, moving on to what have I been reflecting on, right? So that's what I've been grinding on, what I've been reflecting on. Discourse. I've been thinking about it in a very different way. I think about how does discourse affect what you want to play or when you want to get to play it? How does reputation, all these things play a role in the things that you see value in, and how much do you try to filter that out when you actually get to the game? I think it's so interesting, right? So I've come into P4 with the expectation that it can be better than 5, right? I hear certain things about P4 over the years. I've heard certain folks say that it's better than 5 in terms of writing. And so that's the expectation. I'm like, oh, this could be better than 5. That's the expectation. Not that it guarantees it will be, but there might be some through lines that work better for me. That's the perspective. And I'm curious to see how that affects how I digest or sit with some of the core mechanics of the game. But that's what I'm trying to get at, right? When you hear discourse in the ether about a game, when you hear, like, how does that affect the way that you sit at a game? I don't think it's inherently negative or positive. It's just interesting to think about. I think the reason why I've been thinking about this is Expedition Clair Obscura 33. Very, very short to say, I want to play this game. I want to play Clair Obscura. But right now, every time I think about the game, when I reflect on the game, I cannot think about the game without all the discourse around it. And I know that I catch myself in reflections and analysis, but I'm like, I do not want to carry to that game. I want to carry not a pure the wolf's den, but I want to carry a self that is free of certain expectations, and just to sit with it, what it is doing. Because I catch myself in these negative reflex. And I guess I will just admit something around Clair Obscura, Expedition 33 Clair Obscura. I feel that in the discourse, a lot of gaming fans who are more fans of Western RPGs and JRPGs are leaning on the fact that this has a little bit of a more Western taste in terms of style, visually, and storytelling, to warp a lot of this conversation about JRPGs. And that bothers me fundamentally. And so that's not anything to do with the game, right? Like, I know the developers are fans of Final Fantasy VIII. They talk about the world building. We're talking about Legend of Dragoon. Like, the French folks are fully down with the genre. But it's not lost on me that some of the discourse is only happening because it's a game that appeals to a mainstream gamer in certain ways. And that's not even inherently negative. I think we need a game like this in general, right? Like, I'm not literally a cleric, but I'm like, it is useful for games to break into the mainstream discussion to give people experiences that they normally wouldn't have. And so I'm not against that. I just feel that some of the conversation about this is what JRPGs need to be is no longer just rooted in how great Clair Obscura is, but rooted in the, if it was more Western, this is what really is valuable. And I think that secondary piece is sitting under my skin in ways that innately not repulse, that is repulsive to me. That I know that right now, if I were to buy it this year, I would not go into it with the best faith that I want to give that game. Because when people say, like, oh, it is this for RPGs, that, and I'm just like, are you saying this because you believe it, or are you saying this because you don't want to play anything else? And that's the tension that sits with me. And so what I don't want is to go into that game, see its influences, and then be like, oh, it's not doing anything but its influences, when I objectively know that it is doing some kind of nice amalgamation of these things. I want to go in with a mind that is not attached to discourse. And I think that's one of the challenges I think being a fan of RPGs can be, because what do you do with discourse? And this is a negative take, right? Like, this, I think, has affected my ability to play that game. But I think the other side can be interesting, right? Take, for example, me playing Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger, I played with the knowledge that people consider the greatest RPG of all time. Probably played like 2015, somewhere around them times. And I loved it. Fantastic game. But I don't think it's the greatest RPG per se. Like, in the, hey, let's rank greatest RPGs of all time, I'll put it number 1. But for me, for my taste, I'm a Golden Sun nigga. That's who I am. I'm a Golden Sun guy. And as a result of that, it's interesting to think about ways that people talk about Chrono Trigger when they come to it later, right? Or come to it at different times. Because they're coming to it with the legacy of, this is the greatest. And I don't think it negatively influenced my perspective, right? I just noticed as like, could I say that with my straight chest that I think it's the greatest I've ever played? one of the greatest, and the characteristics that make it unique, I do think are fundamentally best representative of the genre. But for me, in a world where Golden Sun, Xenoblade, and Dragon Quest V exists, Chrono Trigger just doesn't match that crop to me. But that's interesting, right? Because I know many folks come to it with even more disdain of like, oh, it's really not that great. And I'm like, I'm not saying all that now. But you can hear it in discourse that the legacy of Chrono Trigger affects how people are able to come to it, engage with it, reflect on it. And I think one of the challenges is that if you are a hardcore fan like myself of gaming discourse in general, you can miss the forest for the trees in certain conversations. I'm thinking about when we talk about Pokemon, we say certain things that are factual, but we lose the forest for the trees of like, well, it did this, it did this, it did this, but because that's not the discourse that we're having, because that's not the canonical framing, we don't really catch those perspectives. And so it makes me think about like, how does discourse even affect the way that we digest anything? And again, not inherently bad or good. It's just one of those things to think about when you go to a game with these expectations. What does it mean when it doesn't, right? Like when you play a game that is known to be one of the greats and you don't like it, do you take it like, are you almost bitter about it? Because that's, I'm gonna just call it, when I think some folks get bitter, it's like, oh yeah, y'all didn't really know what y'all talking, y'all just lying. And mind you, you might feel that way about the use of your time. That's a fair take. But I don't think that's always fair. And I think it's so interesting to meditate on because I also do think that can help you guide you to be able to appreciate things you hadn't taken into consideration, right? Take, for example, the discussion about Dragon Quest for years was this is boring, it's vanilla. But if you've paid attention in certain spaces, it's been like, no, this is like a storybook. Or no, this is a little bit like comfort food. Like the framing of Dragon Quest has started to pivot. Now, is it all the way over here as like really people love it? No, but I think the kind of stale framing of Dragon Quest that used to exist is starting to fade. Not all the way gone, but what that means is that I think people are primed to appreciate DQ for what it is. And I do think that the framing and language has helped that. It's so fascinating when you think about it in that way. It's like how powerful is framing and language and giving words to people to help them notice things, right? Using the storybook approach, like I guess let me use this. I'm thinking about Tim Rogers' video on Dragon Quest XI where he talks about it as playing, listening to a storybook every night, like, and the energy that exudes. And he has the video is incredible, but what he's trying to do in that writing is convey why when people say Dragon Quest is vanilla, they're not really getting at it. Like, yes, it's vanilla, but there's something else here. He's trying to give language and meaning to that. And I know that's generally the power of a good writer, the power of good communication is the power to change the discourse around these things or add to. I just think that it is interesting to reflect on the decisions you make about how you play, the way that you digest something because of conversation. And I don't think anyone can really be free. I think some folks think that they can be truly free of something, and I don't believe that. I think if you're choosing to play a thing, I would say 90% of the time you're going in with some perspectives and ideas, even if it's not about the franchise, but the innate nature of the genre. And that's affecting how you read and analyze a thing. And I don't, again, think that's necessarily wrong or right. It's just interesting to see that what ends up happening to the conversation. I'll make this as a subsection of the conversation. Think about it's a really good game, but it's not a really good Zelda game. What does that really mean? There's a whole other answer. I'd love to talk to Zelda folks eventually more about that. But truthfully, that is the framing that they're going in with. Whereas like when they're going to play a Zelda game, they just want certain things. And then things that deviate from that framing becomes one of those, well, it's not scratching this itch, so is this really meaningful? And there's a whole subset of that, but that's an interesting question, right? How do we end up in those positions where we're like, this is not really the thing, no matter how well it's designed? It's like, well, no, this isn't really what I'm looking for. And franchises can get stuck with that, right? For better and for worse. And depending on how fan bases talk about them, like, uh, I'll mention with no diss to this community, the Metroid community, about what does it mean to be a good Metroid game and the things that they're holding on to. And I'm not even saying they're wrong for holding on to these things. Please don't take this as that. But the framing in which that they talk about what it means to be a good Metroid game, it sometimes you can meet folks who are using the frame specifically of a Super Metroid for all the conversations, that no matter if something else is a different focus or bringing something else to the table, that if it is not in pursuit of that, because to be in this genre is to be in pursuit of the strict exploration components of the genre. I mean, fair, right? Because here's the flip of that. When you buy a franchise, buy a game from a franchise, you are looking for a thing, right? You're looking for something similar. You're looking like that. Those desires to be like, well, I want more of thing. Is not an unfair desire. So I'm not. I don't. It's such a hard question. All right, I'll add this because this is not. This is for a future conversation. But as I said, talking about discourse, framing your expectations. How does it affect how you digest and interpret? I think a lot about what next Monolith's game gonna be. Because I think that is where I'm gonna be put to the test. It's very cool for me to say this about franchises I'm not invested in, right? It's very cool for me to be like, oh, it could be malleable, it can be all these things. It's different when it shows up in your franchise and you have to really sit and say, okay, did I mean what I said? And what does it mean if I do mean or don't believe what I said? So the long story short, for those who don't know, the conversation is that Monolith might do a new franchise on Switch 2, which would be cool. And if you notice in the community, a lot of them want them to leave behind the MMO combat. I'm not happy when I hear that. But I know this to be true. More people would give Xenoblade a chance if it were action or just turn-based. And I wrestle with that question a lot, right? Because I'm like, here's the reasoning. Monolith gave me 4 games of not the same combat, literally, but similar styles. And they're not just short games, they're all 80-hour joints. And most of them, as far as I'm expecting to be good, right? Like I've beaten 1, beaten 3, they're both in my top 5. I haven't beaten X, but I loved X for how far I got. I haven't played 2. I've got, like, if I really need the taste of Xeno in the way that it is, I have an abundance. And so am I willing to be open? Am I willing to not confine them to what my desires are? Am I willing to let them be something different? Can I break my own discourse of expectations and trust that they'll make something good? And this is where I'm holding myself to, right? Where I'm like, okay, if Monolith drops something and it's just strictly action, am I open to that? And I'm trying to be. That's how I'm trying to hold myself to this idea of expectations. Because it would be a disservice if I'm overlooking for the same thing rather than allowing them to grow or allowing to let it see what, like, let the game design be what it is and then see if that works on its own. But I think that's hard for people. I think, as you can tell in my thing, I've really given that some thought where I'm like, if I see some Tails combat, how am I really going to feel that for Xenoblade or whatever Xeno tension, right? Like whatever they can just choose to call it. And I ask that for you, right? If your favorite franchise is going to change and they've given you 4 games in a certain style, what makes you remove the old expectations and allow them to do something new? I think that's an example of like how your own internal discourse can affect what you get. So that's some of the thoughts I've been thinking about. Like, how does my expectations play a role? And does that dictate the games I choose to play, how I play, all of that? And now, what have I been listening to? What have I been thinking about? Shadow World. I feel like it's appropriate if I'm going to talk about Persona, playing the beginning of Persona 4 Golden, Shadow World, that harmonica be hitting. Look, I know Inaba supposed to represent the country, and there's no more country of an instrument than the harmonica. And the truth is elusive. It cannot be written. The lyrics are just bars. And you talk about, you see it on the TV. The industrial triangle, like, it's a banger. It's so good. And I also learned that there is another opening for just P4 and the PS2. And that is also a banger. Now, this one is interesting. So, the P4 intro on the PS2 has trumpets in the background. It's a little bit more acid jazz. Honestly, the way that the girl is singing gives me a little bit of Carleen Anderson vibes. Shout out to GK for talking about brand new heavies on one of our conversations a while back and the influence that that has on Persona. Going down that rabbit hole, I found Carleen Anderson, and the Persona 4 opening is just a Carleen Anderson acid jazz tune. That's just what it is. And by default, by being that, it's great. Like, it's legitimately full dance energy, trumpet, the lighter piano. No, the bass is not very similar to Shadow World. And I cannot decide between these two songs which is better. They're both fantastic. And they both obviously lean into the idea of having access to truth, and I think that's something that we don't get much now, which is songs that literally say the themes of the game. And obviously, for many folks, it's like, you're being very blunt, you're being very heavy handed, but why not lean all into it? Oh, that reminds me of one thing that I did not say in the original, what I've been playing. Very interesting to think that TV is such a key element of this game, and the phone being a key element of P5. It makes me feel curious about, having not played much of 3. I barely remember, like, does any communication technology play a role in that? And then reverse engineering, what does that mean for P6? What is the next technological piece that will affect the way that the game tells the story / maybe how it interacts with the themes, right? I think in that time, going back to 2008, thinking about the role of TV shaping truth is such a very clear perspective. And then thinking about the role of anonymous roles in technology being able to give access to power, right? Like, these are interesting ways that technology interacts with the themes in Persona, but I don't know if it's a consistent aspect, and I don't know if it'll continue it. But just something to think about as a unique thing that stands out in the game so far. And it's funny to think about, like, if you're someone younger than me playing P4, you're looking at the relationship with technology very differently, right? Like, the way that the TV is just there, the way that that's all that Nanako is looking at, they're not really looking at the phones. Like, even the fact that what's our boy's name? I think it's Yu Nakoshima goes out and there's no real interaction between him and the Guardian until he gets back. Things like that that indicate a different place and time. I think they charted as 2011. It's nice to see. It's a cool, like, historical component, and I think it speaks to an appealing part of the Persona series that doesn't play a role for my interest, but I know it's what it gets people excited, which is that it's a modern game in the sense of that it deals with modern issues, modern storytelling, and just modern aesthetics. And I think that is going to be interesting for Persona 6, right? Like, what does it mean to tell a story in about 2025, 2026, whatever the year they put, and telling something that close to home now, right? It's funny. Sorry for the tech issues, but I said Persona is in conversation with GTA as games that tell stories of now, literally whenever now is, and I find that so interesting. Yeah, just a whole thing to keep in the back of your pocket. On that note, we end this week's episode of Menu Combat. Thank you for listening. It's exciting just to be talking about a new game, and I can't guarantee that's what I'll be playing for the next week. I might jump over into Tales. I was playing a little bit of Radiant History. You might hear any of those, but I thought I'd at least share some of my Persona 4 golden thoughts at the beginning. And so, thank you for listening to another week of Menu Combat. Please give a review to Menu Combat on your podcast catcher of your choice. I am the Wolves Den 25. You can find me on the Wolves Den 25 on TikTok, Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter. I mean, if you want to just follow the podcast, Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram. Just thank you so much for listening this season. It means a lot that you guys take your time to listen to me. It is extremely appreciative of what you guys have given to this season. It means a lot. And on that note, don't forget to pause and customize your party. Keep changing the world. Peace.